Here we go, chapter 22. Maybe Gwen Thomas has driven as fast as she did on the way to Cape Town before that day, but Martine seriously doubted it. It was the needle on the ancient red Datsun. It quivered as if it were about to burst through the glass. Martine could tell that her grandmother was very anxious, but she was also very determined. She had agreed to drive Martine to the docks, but no further. If Jemmy isn't there, we'll have to call the police, she said firmly. All of Martine's protests had been in vain. 2 hours that it took to reach the ocean seemed like the longest of Martine's life. Every possible obstacle conspired to delay them. The police roadblock, a traffic jam, a busload of disembarked senior citizens. 3 cows ambling across the road. And all the while Grace's prophecy kept running through Martine's head. The White Giraffe is here, but not for much longer. I see much pain, much pain, much pain. They were on an inland road, and soon the wine estates with their pristine white Cape Dutch buildings and lavender-lined drives were followed by shanty towns reminiscent of Soweto Sende had described to Martine. Mile upon mile of rusty iron and water-stained plywood shacks, worm-ridden dogs, and shifty, hungry-eyed youths. Children played in the dirt with wire toys. The thought of Tende brought back the memory of the day they had spent together. Gwen Thomas pulled off the highway and took the coastal road down to the waterfront. The forbidding crags of Table Mountain, I'll make sure you see what that is in the comment section, were draped in thick cloud. When the tall gray cargo ships and cranes lifted containers came into view, she slowed the car to a crawl. Martine was ready to explode with impatience, but she knew that they had to find a place to hide the car. An overgrown track provided a solution. They bounced over the weeds and stones and parked under a flat-top pine tree. Gwen Thomas opened her door and started to get out of the car. Martine put her hand on her grandmother's sleeve. "Grandmother, this is something I have to do on my own." "I don't think so," Gwen Thomas said wryly. "You're 11 years old, and you're an hour and a half from home." But Martine stood her ground. "It is my fault that Jemmy's been captured. If he's hurt, that'll be my fault. So I have to be the one to try to find him." Gwen Thomas sat back down and closed the car door. A battle was going on behind her eyes. "Where is this all going to end?" she said, and Martine had a feeling that she was talking about much more than the disappearance of the giraffe. She put a hand on Martine's shoulder. "All right, go in and look for your precious Jemmy, but if you're not back in 45 minutes, I'm calling the police. I'm not taking any chances. The pain of losing one child was terrible. Couldn't bear it if I lost another." Martine leaned forward and gave her a kiss on the cheek and was surprised to see her grandmother's blue eyes filled with tears. "Thanks for everything," she said. She hopped out of the car and ran back along the track to the main road. The ocean wind cut through her thin T-shirt like a knife, and the salty air tingled in her nostrils. At the bottom of the hill, behind a high fence fortified with coils of razor wire, lay the shipyard. Beyond it the sea was churning white-capped green. The shipyard was buzzing with activity, and she could hear dogs barking. Guard dogs, perhaps. Martine waited, shivering behind a tree for a couple of cars to pass. She was beginning to regret that she hadn't bought a jacket. She put a hand on the medicine pouch that Grace had given her at the secret valley. In the car, her grandmother commented on it, but Martine would say nothing about it except it had been a gift from a friend to bring her luck. Now she drew courage from it. She also brought along Mr. Morrison's Swiss Army knife for good measure. If she'd get to Jemmy, she was sure she could help him. When the road was clear, she sprinted to the gate and slipped behind the wooden guardhouse. She intended to try to walk her way in, but when she peered through the salt-smeared window, there didn't seem to be any really need. There were 2 security men in the hut. One was watching rugby on TV and stirring a cup of tea, his chair balancing precariously on its rear legs. The other was on his radio, his back toward the window. He was having an argument. "Who you calling an idiot? Over?" Furious crackling followed. Martine didn't want to hear any more. She ducked under the barrier and ran for the mountainous lines of blue, red, and gray containers. With every stride, she expected to hear voices yelling for her to stop, but no one seemed to notice her, except a snarl that almost turned her blood to yogurt brought her to a terrified halt. A Rottweiler was blocking her path. His lips pulled back over teeth as if and as numerous as a crocodile's. In spite of the icy breeze, Martine began to sweat. Instinctively, she fixed her green eyes on the Rottweiler's big yellow ones and focused all her energy on dominating him, telling them that if he dared to prevent her from saving Jemmy, she'd personally feed him to the sharks. Then she commanded him to lie down and to let her pass. To her astonishment, the Rottweiler sank to the ground with a piteous whine. He put his paws over his eyes. If Martine hadn't been so scared, she would have laughed. She stepped over him and sneaked forward until she came to a gap between two metal containers. Through it she could see the docks. There were 3 gray ships and a blue and a white tugboat in the harbor. The shipyard itself was busting with workers. Martine estimated that there were about 25 crates and several expensive cars in the process of being loaded. There was no sign of a giraffe. Time was running out for Jemmy, and she didn't know where to start. How could she even begin to search 3 ships the size of skyscrapers? What was she been thinking? Why hadn't she just called the police as her grandmother suggested? Why did she always have to do things the hard way? Why is she always so stubborn? Suddenly she was grabbed from behind. "Let go of me!" she screeched, and began to fight and squeal like a wounded warthog. She and her assailant hit the ground with a thud. Martine lay on her stomach, groaning, too winded to move. "I'm arresting you for trespassing on private property," said a clear young voice. "You have the right to remain silent." Martine rolled over and still breathing heavily. "You!" she cried. A pair of lion's eyes gazed calmly back at her. "Hello, Martine," Ben said, grinning. And that's the end of chapter 22.